All right, welcome, welcome, everyone. So good to see everyone here for this month's edition of the SAC Genre Storytelling Series. I'm Liz Nichols, and I'll be your MC for tonight. I am a former SAC board member from more than 20 years ago, a very enthusiastic SAC member, and the co-host of the Contra Costa County Tail Spinners Swap. So I'm just thrilled to be emceeing tonight with this great group of storytellers from all around our state. Before I start introducing them to you, a couple of housekeeping things. We will be asking our audience to mute yourselves, especially, and the storytellers will unmute themselves while they're telling a story, and also with a little something we're going to do to warm ourselves up. But we appreciate your being on mute. You can show your appreciation to each wonderful storyteller by doing this Zoom clapping, and also by putting comments in the chat. We appreciate it if you put the comments in the chat in between the stories, because it can be distracting. Also, it's up to you whether you want to use chat or not. It's up to you whether you want to watch this in gallery view, where you can see all of us, or in speaker view, where you'll just see the person speaking. And because storytelling is an interactive, event, as we all know, we love to see your faces. So if it's appropriate for you to be on camera, then that would be lovely. You choose. Okay. Well as being a storyteller, I am also a certified laughter yoga leader. And some of you may have heard of laughter yoga, and some of you may have not. Some of you may have done laughter yoga, some of you may have not. But in order to warm up our laughter muscles, since this is the humorous and laughing story edition of our genre series, we're going to practice laughing. And of course, there's so many things that make us laugh: a good story, a good funny story, but we also mainly laugh because other people around us are laughing. And that's the idea behind laughter yoga. We're not laughing for a reason right now for the next couple of minutes. We're just going to laugh because others are laughing, and as a form of exercise. So I want to ask the storytellers for tonight, our performers, to unmute, because one of the best ways to laugh is to hear other people laughing. And you see behind me this ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Let's take our hands, put them on our bellies, because we want our belly laugh muscles, right? And just repeat after me. And feel like, put your index fingers over your belly button and spread your fingers. And let's repeat after me. I'm going to just make these laughter sounds. Ho, ho. Now you do it.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ha, ha, ha.
Ha, ha, ha.
Can you feel that? Okay, let's put it together. Ho, ho,
Ho,
ha, ha, ha.
Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha.
I can't hear all of you, but I hope you're doing it. We're going to do it 3 more times. Let's do it one time a little faster. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha.
Ho, ho, ha, 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 ha.
One more time, a little faster even. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha.
Ho, ho, ha, ha.
Now we're going to add clapping and moving to that, which makes it laughter yoga. Now, after this, you can tell everyone you know that you do yoga. Very serious. We go like this, and it's going to be chaotic because of the Zoom lag, but it looks like this. Just watch me first. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. Join in. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Very good. Take a breath in. If it feels good, lift your arms up as you breathe in. We're connecting our mind, our body, and our spirit with our breath. Breathe out. And just say this. I'll do it, then you do it. Very good. Very good. Yay! Very good.
Very good.
Yay! So I invite you to try that anytime. All right. Thanks for doing that with me. It's a good way to get
Thank you
ourselves.
very much.
Thank
That
you.
was fun.
Good.
Hi.
All
Oh,
right. I'm going to go into gallery view. I'm going to ask our tellers to mute themselves, except for our first teller, who will be David Schmidt. Now, let me introduce. So I'll introduce each storyteller. They'll each have about 10 minutes to tell us, then they're going to tell you a story. I don't think we've mentioned yet that unfortunately, Linda Kennedy, who was going to be one of our storytellers tonight, she is unable to be here. Something family thing came up, but we have a whole, we've filled in and we have a whole great roster of storytellers. So, and our great tech host, Andrew Loffer, will keep us on track. So David Schmidt is with the group Storytellers of San Diego. So we're starting way at the bottom of the state, and we're going to move all around the state. David is an author. He's a professional storyteller, a podcaster, and a multilingual translator. He, in fact, splits his time between San Diego and Mexico City, and he speaks 12 languages, plus the universal language of laughter. He's brought that laughter, that humor, to 33 countries, and tonight he's going to tell us a story called Accidental Cannibalism, a True Story. David, take it away.
Well, when I moved to Russia in 2003 after college, I knew I was going to face a lot of challenges and a lot of new situations. I didn't think that cannibalism would be one of them, though. Now, I knew it would be different, really different from life back in California, especially back then, 2003, 2004, when I lived there, when I worked as a volunteer. The country was still really trying to pick the pieces back up, still reeling from perestroika, from the destruction of the country. And so the infrastructure was just shot, and they're still really trying to reinvent the nation. And so that was an adjustment for someone from California, adjusting to these new forms of public transportation, sometimes cobbled together, sometimes people turning their own cars into taxis, and sometimes the things you would run into on public transportation. One of the days I was taking the trolley bus connected to these electrical lines, and I was standing at the back with my friend, and there were kind of the usual suspects on the trolley bus, but then this woman sitting on the seats by us, she caught my eye, and I couldn't tell what exactly about this woman really stood out to me. I thought maybe her hair was kind of frazzled, or maybe it was her dress that was in these really loud, bright colors, or maybe it was the fact that she had a huge freaking orangutan sitting next to her on the bus, like a real orangutan, like 500 pounds, just sitting there wearing shorts, and he had a ticket. He was staring at his ticket. And I went up to the lady. I said, "Dude, what's up with the monkey, man? Why is there an orangutan riding the bus?" Turns out she worked with the circus in town, in this town of Saratov where I lived, and the circus didn't have enough funds to pay for transportation for their orangutan, so he had to take the bus like everybody else, and he had to pay his 2-ruble ticket like everyone else. And he was well behaved. He even stuck out his hand to shake my hand and say hello. And I was just thankful that this woman wasn't the tiger trainer or something from the circus. So I knew it was a different place. It was a different country. But one of the biggest surprises came where I least expected it. See, I was getting adjusted to all of this kind of crumbling infrastructure. And so I asked people the rules of things you could and couldn't do. Can you throw toilet paper in the toilet? And at some point I said, can you drink the water from the tap? Is it drinkable? And all my friends told me, yes, it's fine. I mean, not everybody does it, but it's fine. It won't hurt you. Now I lived with two other Americans. They didn't want to drink the water from the tap, but I told them, come on, we can't look like rich, spoiled, arrogant Americans. We need to adjust to the way things are done. And so I told them, we're going to be drinking the tap water, guys. Now they insisted on boiling it. They were all paranoid and afraid, but I didn't mind. It had kind of a weird metallic taste a little bit, but for the most part, I didn't get sick or anything. It tasted fine. And so I kept doing it. We moved there in April, and all through April, I drank the tap water every day. But then by May, that metallic taste, it got worse. And it got another kind of weird undertaste to it that, wine sommeliers might describe in fancy terms. I didn't know what to call it. It was just weird. And I kept on drinking it. And then one day in May, toward the end of May, this whole city water supply just shut off. And we had no more running water. I asked my Russian friends that we were working with as volunteers, and they said, yeah, that's normal. Sometimes it shuts off for a day or two. But this time it stayed shut off. And 2 days and 3 days passed, and eventually we were washing our vegetables with bottled mineral water, and we just had to stop bathing, and we had to flush the toilet with the water we had left over in our little washing machine. And for a week, there was no running water in our apartment at all. It was really strange. Even my Russian friends, they said, yeah, that's not normal. A week, it's a long time. Now, after a week, it came back on again, and everything seemed back to normal. So my Russian friends, they were over visiting us at our house, and we were chatting about the gossip. And at some point they asked me, they said, hey, did you hear about why the city's water supply was shut off? And now we're speaking Russian at this time. I had studied Russian before I went there. So I knew basic Russian, but my vocabulary wasn't great. And so I could kind of follow conversations. But then I asked my friends, no, why was the water shut off? And they said, ну, нашли трупа. Был труп там в воздушной системе. They said, and there was this word in there, труп. And I never heard this word, troop. It sounds like the English word for troops, but I know this is a military thing. And so I said, hang on, let me get my dictionary. And I pulled it out, and I'm looking through the Cyrillic letters. There's the T. And I look up troop, and troop is a cadaver or a corpse. They were saying they had found a corpse in the city's water supply in the cistern that we were all drinking from. And they did some studies on that corpse, and they found out that cadaver had been floating there for a month. That whole month that I'd been drinking this tap water that my friends insisted on boiling, I'd been drinking corpse water for a month. So I told my friends back home, and everyone made fun of me. Even my buddy's little brother, he was in kindergarten, and he drew a picture of us drinking our corpse water, this cute little kindergartner's picture. And it's of us smiling, and the sun is smiling with a face, and we're pouring water out of the tap, and there's an eyeball coming out of the tap, and there's a whole human brain coming out of the tap. And he thought that was what our life was like in Russia, drinking the tap water. Now, it can be easy to laugh when another country has its infrastructure falling apart, especially if that country happens to be our country's political enemy at the time. But we shouldn't take joy in the misfortune of others, because I came across the same situation years later back in the United States. I came back here years later, and I became a court translator, immigration court, and I would translate in Spanish and Russian. And sometimes they would send me to other cities, and they would send me to Los Angeles. So I asked a colleague if he knew of any cheap places to stay near the court in downtown Los Angeles. And he told me about a hotel that happened to be right in the middle of Skid Row, in the most terrifying part of downtown Los Angeles. And I went to this hotel, and it's called the Hotel Cecil. Some of you might have heard the name of the Hotel Cecil before. And if you've heard it, you kind of know where this is going. The Hotel Cecil, it was famous for all kinds of scary things happening there, tragedies. Serial killers had stayed there and lived there in the past. It's a scary place to stay. And you go in, and just all the hallways, the lights are flickering, and you hear strange sounds from the other rooms. It's right in the middle of Skid Row, so all kinds of people who are down on their luck would stay there. But I mean, it was only $30 a night. So I kept on staying there. Every time I would work in Los Angeles, I would stay in this terrifying hotel and maybe wonder if I'd wake up dead. But I made it through every night. It was fine. It felt relatively safe until months later, a friend told me, "Hey, what's the name of that hotel you always stay at in Los Angeles?" "Yeah, the Cecil." They said, "You know what they found at that hotel? They went up into the cistern because the water started tasting funny at that hotel. And they checked out that cistern and they found a dead body floating in the cistern, the whole water supply for the hotel." And I said, "Wait, when was this?" So I asked about, and I did the math and I thought about the dates when this happened. Turns out it was exactly the date of the last time that I was staying in the Hotel Cecil. I said, son of a bitch, again with the corpse water, man. Why is this following me around? Is this just my destiny to drink corpse water for my life? And maybe it is. And next time I'll just accept it as part of my destiny because, like it or not, it's a part of who I am now. I don't enjoy it, but sometimes life throws you these fun surprises, and sometimes they involve a little bit of accidental cannibalism.
Oh, thank you, David. Very good, very good. Yeah. Oh, wow, accidental cannibalism. Who knows how many others of us have committed that without knowing? That's what I'm wondering now. Okay. And that is an, example of laughing at things that like you can't do anything about. All right. Our next storyteller is going to be Beverly Schwartz. And to invite Beverly here to tell you a story, we had to go all the way from the south of California, actually to the north of upstate New York, because Bev, and I think many of you know Bev, since the pandemic from many different California swap gatherings and other gatherings on Zoom, that she's discovered us and we've discovered her. And she is the newest member, or one of the newest members, of the Sacramento Storytelling Guild. She is a retired elementary school teacher who is, and I'm just blown away by this, the first educator in our country to create a STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, and math curriculum, which has now, of course, spread all over the country and the world. And on top of that, in her retirement, she has become, I think you always were, a storyteller. And she's going to tell us a story called My Pet Chicken. Take it away.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. I see a lot of people in the audience that I know, and I'm so happy to see all of you. I was 4 years old. My grandmother had a two-family house. My grandmother and grandfather lived downstairs. My mother, father, I, and brother lived upstairs. Well, my grandparents were Orthodox Jews, and every Friday evening, my mother and father and brother and I, my uncle, aunt, my cousins, we'd all go down to my grandparents' house, and there they had Shabbos dinner. Now, when I turned 4, my grandmother came to me and said, Bev, I'm going to have to start teaching you how to prepare and make a Shabbos dinner. So when you grow up, you'll be able to make a dinner for your family and other relatives. So she started teaching me. She showed me how to knead the challah bread. She taught me how to make the gefilte fish, the pickles, and the barrel that she had. And she taught me how to make the desserts and everything you can ever imagine. So then one day I went down, and in a bag, a burlap bag, squawk, squawk, squawk. I go, what's in the bag, Grandma? She said, a chicken, a live chicken? Yes. I said to myself, I think she's given me my pet that I've been asking for, because my uncle had just gotten a parakeet. So I started asking for my own pet. She picked a pet chicken for me. And I said, can I see it? And she opened the bag, and I put my hand in, and it had beautiful, lush, soft feathers. And I petted it, and she was, ah! My grandmother said, get your hand out of there. And she tied the burlap bag. She goes, come, we have to go somewhere. So she takes me in a bus and downtown Albany, where my grandfather had a tailor shop. And down as we're going in the bus, the chicken's squawking away, squawk, squawk, squawk. And she's just ignoring it. And I'm looking and saying, what am I going to name my pet chicken? Oh, I can't wait to pick out a name. Well, we got down, said hello to my grandpa, and we crossed the street. And across the street, we went into this door of a building, and there was sawdust on the floor and benches. And there was all these women pulling feathers out of chickens. Squawk, squawk. They were all like in pain. Squawk, squawk. I looked at the bag and I looked at my grandmother and said, oh no, is she going to do that to my pet chicken? And sure enough, we sit on the bench. She takes out my pet chicken and she starts plucking the feathers and say, come, Bev, let me show you how to do it. I'm not going to hurt my chicken. So she plucked all the feathers out. And as I looked at this chicken without any feathers, I said, Grandma, will the feathers grow back? She didn't answer me, just shook her head. Then she said, come. And I saw all the women had put their chicken back in the burlap bag and were getting in line to go to this big, heavy-set man. He had a black hat and he had curls coming down his head and a beard and a black jacket and white shirt. And my grandmother said, that's the rabbi. He's going to say a prayer over our chicken so it's kosher. That's what makes the chicken kosher, the rabbi's prayer. I had no idea what that meant, but I nodded. And it was our turn. He takes my chicken out of the bag, holds it by its feet, plucks it in a big sink, and he cut the neck a little and blood started falling into the sink. I think my chicken's gonna die. Sure enough, the chicken went limp. My grandmother held over the bag, put the chicken in the bag. She tied and says, come, Bev, now we have to go home. I looked and looked on the bus to see if there was even a movement in that bag. Nothing moved. My chicken never moved. I think I realized why. We got home. My grandmother takes me into the kitchen because there's one more thing I have to show you, Bev. You know my chicken soup that everyone says is the best in the world. Well, I'm going to show you how to take the eggs out of the chicken now. And she sticks her hands in, pulls out yellow goop. And I said, that's not an egg, Grandma, there's no shell. She goes, that's right. They only put, when the chicken goes to lay the egg, that's when the chicken shell develops. Right now it's just pure yellow goop. She takes it, she walks over to the stove, plops it into the soup. This is what makes my soup the best in the world. I had it. She goes, now I'm going to cut the chicken up and roast it. And I said, I'm going upstairs, Grandma. I've had enough. Yeah. And I went upstairs. Well, it was supper time. My mother says, come on, we all have to go. Your cousins are down there. Let's go play with them. Well, I was not in a great mood, but I just sat at the table and we lit the candles. We said the prayers. We cut the challah. The hors d'oeuvres and everything was spread out, and then came dinner. The first thing were the bowl of soups, and we passed it all around. But when it came to me, I passed it. I swore I would never eat my grandmother's chicken soup again, especially with the eggs of my chicken. And then came this beautiful platter of my chicken with the potatoes on it and vegetables, and we passed it around. When it came to me, I just passed it. I swore I would never eat chicken again as long as I lived. Everyone enjoyed dinner. I just ate anything but the chicken and the soup. Well, that night, I didn't sleep well, but I did think of a name for my chicken. But I wasn't going to tell anybody until I got a real pet, and that was going to be my pet's name. And I named my first dog Shayna. That was the name. But my mother says to me a few weeks later, Bev, we're moving. We've been building a house. It's in the suburbs here in Latham. And that's where I ended up growing up. And she said, Bev, we will be able to not have to worry about where we go on our food like Grandma and Grandpa. What we're going to do is go to a grocery store named Price Chopper. and we'll be able to get our food there. And we don't have to worry about it being kosher or not. And I said, really? Yeah, put the food in the baskets, all the food will be packaged and ready to go. And all we'll have to do is go through the register. We won't have to go get the chicken where grandma gets it. We won't have to do all that work. It'll be in jars and cans, whatever. Really? I was so relieved. I never wanted to go through what my grandmother was putting me through. And I said, we really just have to go to this grocery store from now on? And she said, yes. And I said, thank God for Price Chopper.
Thank you, Bev. Thank God for Price Chopper.
Yeah,
Well, of
that's
course-
our local store. I still go there.
All right. Well, my grandmother always, I think she thought her chicken soup was the best, but I'm glad I never saw all of what went into making it. And I kind of, I feel I shouldn't say this to you, but I would like to have tried your grandmother's chicken soup, but I can understand why you might not feel the same.
Right. I do eat chicken now, but and I was given, when my grandmother died, I was given her plate. So every time I look at this beautiful serving plate, I think of this story.
Ah, that's it. The things in our homes remind us of the stories. And that's sent out to everybody who's listening, and a lot of you are storytellers, but if you don't consider yourself a storyteller, you've got things in your home that remind you of those important stories. So make sure that you celebrate them, share them any way that works for you and to anybody who you want to hear them. All right. Well, our next storyteller is Terry Stokes, and he's from right in my neck of the woods, the San Francisco Bay Area. He lives in El Cerrito, right next to Berkeley. He moved to the Bay Area in 2006 after 30 years as a film editor in Hollywood. And since retiring, he's gone on the other side of maybe not the camera, but the stage, up on the stage, doing acting, singing, and storytelling. He also, I'm not sure, Terry, if you are a former board member of SAC, but I think so. And I know that you've been so important. Yes. Especially working on storyline. So those of, that's one of our big benefits as SAC members. And Terry has put a lot of sweat and soul and tears and talent into that over the years. So thank you for that, Terry. Now, I asked Terry, what makes you laugh? He said, I love satire and whimsy. My brother sends me graphics and cartoons that tickle me. And humor pulls me through all the chaos. The story he's going to tell tonight, he's going to retell the title story from Isaac Bashevis Singer's 1994 book called Shrewd Toady and Lizer the Miser and Other Children's Stories. And I don't know if those of you out there know Isaac Bashevis Singer, the only writer to win the Nobel Prize for Literature for writing in Yiddish. And I can see my grandfather sitting in his armchair reading Isaac Bashevis Singer's stories in the Jewish Daily Fovitz, the Forward, and chuckling, and us kids totally clueless, because when we looked at that paper, it was just a bunch of squiggly lines. So please tell us a wonderful story, Terry Stokes.
Thanks, Liz. In a very small village in the Ukraine lived a very poor man by the name of Toady. Now, Toady had a wife, Shendel, and 7 children.
David, stop it.
But he could never earn enough money to feed them properly. Over the years, he tried many trades and failed miserably at all of them. It was said of Toady that if he decided to go into the candle making business, the sun would never set. But he was nicknamed Shrewd Toady because whenever he did earn some money, it was always by means of trickery. This particular winter was an especially harsh one. The snowfall was heavy and the winds were severe, howling constantly. And Toady had no money to even buy firewood for the stove. So the children stayed all day under the covers in bed in order to keep warm. Now, when the frost burns fiercely on the outside, it burns even more cruelly on the inside, especially when hunger is present. And Shendel's larder was empty, so she reproached Toady bitterly, saying, "If you cannot feed your wife and children, I will go to the rabbi and get a divorce." And Toady replied, "Yeah? And what will you do with it? Eat it?" In the same village there lived a very rich man named Lizer. Because of his stinginess, he was known as Lizer the Miser. He permitted his wife to only bake bread once a month because he had discovered that fresh bread is eaten much more rapidly than stale. Lizer had a goat, but he never fed her. So the goat had learned to visit the houses of neighbors who pitied her and fed her potato peelings. Nevertheless, each year that goat gave birth to a kid. And then Lizer milked the goat. But, miser that he was, he never drank it himself or shared it with his own family. Instead, he sold it to the villagers at a very dear price. On several occasions, Toady had gone to Lizer for a loan, but Lizer always replied, "I sleep better at night knowing that my money lies in my strong box rather than in your pockets." Because of his stinginess, Toady decided that he would take revenge on Lizer, and at the same time make some much needed money for himself and his family. One day, Lizer was sitting in the kitchen on a wooden box eating borscht and stale bread. He only used his chairs on holidays in order to preserve the upholstery. And there was a knock on the kitchen door, and in walked Toady, and he said, "Reb Lizer, I would like to ask a favor. My oldest daughter, Basha, is already 15, and she's about to get engaged. A young man from Janov is coming to look her over this evening. My cutlery is tin, and my wife is ashamed to ask him to eat soup with a tin spoon. Would you consider lending me one of your silver tablespoons? I will return it tomorrow, I give you my holy oath." Well, Lizer knew that Toady would never dare to break a holy oath, so he lent him the spoon. But that evening, no young man came to look Basha over. As usual, she walked around the house barefoot in rags, and Lizer's tablespoon lay hidden in Toady's shirt pocket. Now, in the early years of his marriage, Toady had possessed a full set of silverware. But he had long since sold it all, with the exception of 3 silver teaspoons that were only used on Passover. The following day, Lizer sat on his wooden box eating his borscht and stale bread in his underwear in order to preserve his clothes, when Toady returned. "Reb Lizer, here's the tablespoon I borrowed yesterday." He placed it on the table, and then he put down one of his own silver teaspoons next to it. Lizer said, "What is the teaspoon for?" "Well, your tablespoon gave birth to a teaspoon last night. It is her child, and since I'm an honest man, I am returning both mother and child to you." Lizer was astonished. He had never heard of spoons giving birth to other spoons. Nevertheless, his greed overcame his doubt, and he happily accepted both spoons. Such an unexpected stroke of good fortune. A few days later, Lizer once again was sitting on his wooden box, eating his borscht, stale bread, his threadbare clothes, and the door opened and Toady appeared. Reb Lizer, the young man from Janov did not please Basha because she said he had donkey ears. But this evening another young man is coming to look her over. Shindel is cooking a very special soup for him, and she's ashamed to." Before Toady could even finish the sentence, Lizer interrupted. "You want to borrow a silver tablespoon, perhaps? Take one, with pleasure." The following day, Toady returned Lizer's spoons, along with one of his own silver teaspoons. He explained that the large tablespoon had given birth during the night to the small spoon, and in all good conscience, he was returning both mother and newborn baby. Needless to say, Liza was overjoyed. And exactly the same thing happened a third time. And Liza asked, "Does it ever happen that a spoon can give birth to twins?" Toady thought about this for a moment, and then he said, "Why not? I've even heard of a case where a spoon gave birth to triplets." Almost a week went by, and Toady did not visit Liza. But on Friday morning, Liza was sitting in his wooden box with his borscht and stale bread, and Toady reappeared, and Liza said, "Good morning to you, young man. What brings you here today? Perhaps you've come to borrow another tablespoon? If so, help yourself." "Thank you, Reb Liza, but I have an additional favor to ask. This evening, a young man is coming from Lublin to look Basha over. He is the son of a very rich man, and I'm told he's very clever and handsome as well. Not only do I need a silver spoon, but since he will remain with us over the Sabbath, I need a pair of silver candlesticks because my wife is ashamed to put our candlesticks on the table. They're made of brass, and she's ashamed to have them on the Sabbath table. Would you lend me, sir, 2 of your silver candlesticks? Immediately after the Sabbath, I give you my holy oath that I will return them to you along with your spoon." Now, silver candlesticks were of great value, and Liza hesitated, but only for a moment. Remembering his luck with the spoons, he said, "I have 8 candlesticks. Take them all. I know you will return them, and if it should happen that any of them, give birth, well, I have no doubt that you will be as honest as you have been in the past." And Tony replied, "Certainly. Let's hope for the best." Well, Tony took the silver spoon and he tucked it into his shirt pocket as usual, but he took the candlesticks directly to a merchant in the village and sold them for a considerable sum, and he bought the money to Shendel. And she demanded to know where he'd gotten such a treasure. "Well, when I went out this morning, a cow flew over the roof and laid a dozen silver eggs, and I sold them at the market, and here's the money." "I have never heard of a cow flying and laying eggs." "Well, there's always a first time. If you don't want the money, give it back." "There will be no talk of giving back." Shendel knew her husband was full of cunning and tricks, but when children are hungry, it's better not to ask too many questions. So she went to the market and she bought meat and she bought fish, white flour, and even some nuts and raisins for pudding. And since a lot of money still remained, she bought shoes and clothes for the children, along with some much needed firewood. It was a warm and very gay Sabbath in Toadie's house. The boys sang and the girls danced, and when the children asked him where he had gotten the money, he replied, "It is forbidden to talk about money during the Sabbath." Sunday came, and Liza was sitting on his box eating his borscht and stale bread as usual when Toady arrived. Handing Liza his tablespoon, he put it on the table and he said, "It is too bad, but this time your spoon did not give birth to a baby." "Well, what about the candlesticks?" "I'm saddened to tell you, but your candlesticks died." Liza leapt from his box. The borscht and the stale bread went flying, and he leapt up and he said, "You fool! How can a candlestick die?" "Well, if spoons can give birth, candlesticks can die." Liza had Toady called before the rabbi, and when the rabbi heard both sides of the story, he burst out laughing. "Liza, Liza, Liza, it serves you right. If you hadn't chosen to believe that your spoons gave birth, now you won't be forced to believe your candlesticks died." But it's all nonsense." "Exactly. If you accept nonsense when it brings you profit, then you must also accept nonsense when it brings you loss." And the rabbi dismissed the case. The story of the silver spoons that gave birth and the candlesticks that died spread quickly throughout the village. The shoemakers and tailors' apprentices, as was their custom whenever there was some important event that happened in the village, they made up a song about it. And it goes like this. Liza, put your grief aside. So what if your candlesticks have died? You're the richest man on earth, with silver spoons that can give birth, and silver eggs as living proof of flying cows above your roof. Don't sit there eating crusts of bread. 2 silver grandsons look ahead. And time passed, and each morning the first thing that Liza did when he came down to the kitchen was open his silverware drawer to see if another generation of spoons had arrived during the night. But alas, his tablespoons never gave birth again. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Too bad for Toady and Liza, for Liza, but too good for us to get to hear that. And definite chuckle-inducing story. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So from the Bay Area now, we're going to travel east, not so far as Albany, New York, but we're traveling to the Sierra foothills. And we're welcoming Sherry Anderson of the Foothill Storytelling Guild to come on next. Now, Sherry has a Southern style yarn for us, but she grew up in New Mexico. And she told me that in her family, storytelling was an everyday activity. Her father had the reputation as the tall tale teller, but she's going to challenge him, I think, tonight with a story called No Tall Tale at All. Welcome, Sherry.
All right. Thank you so much, Liz. Can I ask you to unmute yourself so I can hear you laugh? I'm hoping we're going to hear some laughter. So as Liz said, I grew up in New Mexico in Roswell, which has got its own little background. When I was a little girl, on Sundays, our great entertainment was going for a drive. We'd get in the car and we'd drive out into the countryside or drive over to a relative's house or something. And this one Sunday, my dad and I, we were driving, taking a drive, and we stopped at one of those roadside produce stands, and Daddy bought a watermelon. And he carried it over and he put it on the floorboard there where my feet were. And then we went around, got in the car, and we drove off. And as we were driving away, I told Daddy that that was probably the biggest watermelon in the whole world. Well, you see, my daddy was from Texas, and he considered that a challenge. And so he told me this story, and he said, Nah, sugar, when I was a kid, I raised a watermelon twice that size. You see, old Jake White over at the county store, he used to offer a $5 prize every summer to the kid who could raise the biggest watermelon. And this year I was, about 12. I decided I could make pretty good use of that summer. But we were living in West Texas at the time. West Texas can be mighty dry. And I was a little concerned about getting some water for that watermelon patch. So what I did, there was this old freight wagon sitting there in the yard, and I put some dirt in the back of this old wagon, and I planted my watermelon seeds in that freight wagon. And I kept a team of mules hitched to that wagon. And any time I would see rain over on the horizon somewhere, I would jump on that wagon and I would whip up those mules and we would roll out across the countryside and then we'd just kind of follow along under the rain. And let me tell you, sugar, I grew a watermelon patch in the back of that freight wagon that was a thing to behold. I grew one watermelon that was wedged from one side of that wagon all the way to the other. But then, sad to say, my mules, they up and died from exhaustion.
Oh dear.
And then, without water, that watermelon started to shrink. And it didn't stop shrinking until it got to be about the size of a chicken egg. Laying there in the back of that freight wagon, we came out one morning, and Ma's prize Banny hen was sitting on that watermelon egg. Now, Sugar, we had a good laugh about that, but Henny, she had the last laugh because it wasn't long until that watermelon egg hatched. And what popped out was the prettiest little red chicken you ever did see. Now, that little red chicken, he ran around the yard there for a few months or so, and then, sad to say, that little red chicken committed suicide with an axe.
No.
Mama fried that chicken up for Sunday supper, and oh, that chicken meat was so sweet and so juicy. I mean, the juice just dripped off our elbows as we were chewing on it. And there was only one little kind of problem. You see, it had little black seeds running all through it. So after supper, I went around the table and I just kind of gathered up all those chicken seeds. I gave them a good wash and I laid them out to dry. And come spring, I planted those chicken seeds and I grew a watermelon that was better than the one in the freight wagon. Every single melon was a prize winner. Well, the day came of old Jake White's contest, and I got Homer and Claude to go out in the patch with me, and we picked this one big old melon, and the three of us were struggling to get it up in Dad's pickup, and well, it fell and it broke, and well, sad to say, Dad's prize coonhound drowned in the juice before he could get out of the way. So we had to take our second best melon and we got it in there and we got down to the general store, and when we went in, all these watermelons were already stacked up on the counter. We got my melon up there on the counter, and I stepped back and whoa, Sugar, I felt pretty good. My melon was the greenest melon. My melon was the shiniest melon there. Melon was the biggest melon in that whole counter. But old Jake White, he was a guy like to put on a show, so he came out of the back room and he had a yardstick and a string, and he started down at the other end there, and he took his string to that first watermelon and he wound it around, and then he went long wise around, and then he stretched that string out on the yardstick and made a little note in a notepad. Just before he walked away, he curled up his finger and he brought it down against that watermelon. And this big thunk echoed through the room. Then he went on to the second melon and he measured a roundabout and end about, and he laid out the string and he made his little note and he raised his knuckle and he brought it down. Thunk! And down to the next one, roundabout, thunk. Then, Sugar, he got to my watermelon. And he stood there and looked at it and shook his head and he went, but, he had to go through with it because it was a contest, really. So he took that string and he wrapped it around my watermelon. Then he stretched it around the other way, and then he stretched it out on that yardstick a couple of times and he made a note. Then old Jake Whitey curled up his knuckle and he brought it down against that shiny green watermelon that I grew from chicken seeds. Sugar, my watermelon started to cluck. Well, I gotta tell you, I was maybe about 7 or 8 when Daddy told me this story, and he looked over at me sitting next to him on the front seat, and he could see I didn't quite believe him. And he pulled out his arm and he pulled me close and he said, "Sugar, that's no tall tale at all." So you know what? I believe my daddy because he never lied to me. He told me so.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. What a fun story. What a fun story. And how fun to hear each other's laughter. And also, isn't it so cool when we didn't plan it? Nobody, we didn't know, but your story and Bev's story kind of echo, I love when that happens. It just seems to happen so often in storytelling
Yes.
evenings that there is the whole is greater than all the parts because of those connections.
Uh-huh.
Now, before everybody mutes you, before you mute yourself, we've got a lot more good stories to go. We might need a little stretch break, very short one, to make sure our brains are ready to hear more. So if you want to stand up, but we're going to do a little more with laughter. One of the ways that laughter yoga can work is to just add laughter to the kind of things we do anyway to let go of stress. And one of the things I bet a lot of us do is shoulder rolls. And I've been sitting for a while, right? That really helps. So do a couple and it feels good just like that. But then, since this is a kind of yoga, it means we're using the breath as part of our mind-body connection. So breathe in as you lift your shoulders up and breathe out, just sigh out. And now we'll go backwards, but instead of sighing out, breathe in and just giggle out. And do it a couple more times. That's all there is to it. Very
It's
good.
contagious.
Very good. Yay.
Hey.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please now, if you're not the next storyteller, mute yourself. If you're John White, please keep your microphone on. And I think, yes, Andrew is going to spotlight both of us. And I hadn't met John before this. I'm thrilled to meet him. He is from North Hollywood. He wants you, he seemed uncomfortable saying the name of the city that goes with it, but he is from Los Angeles. And there in Los Angeles area, there is a Toastmasters Story Masters group, which I think those are fantastic groups. And John White is part of that. And John wants us to know that he once had it all. He had a beautiful wife, happy kids, a big house, a dream job, and even a BMW. But then the Great Recession of 2008 came and the not so great divorce of 2016, and he lost it all. Now he rents, he says, in a crappy part of town and drives a Prius. Oh, the indignities of life, but at least, he says, he still has the kids. And the story he's going to tell us tonight is called The Questions These Kids Come Up With. Welcome, John White.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you all, new friends. If you don't mind, if I could do what Sherry did and just have people unmute, hopefully there's a few laugh lines in this, so if we're comfortable with that, I'd like that as well.
Yep.
All right, great. Why is being a dad so difficult? I know I make it look easy, but it's difficult. It's more difficult than convincing your wife that she's better looking than her supermodel girlfriend. It's more difficult than being in LA, being 50 and not having plastic surgery. That difficult. And finally, it's more difficult being at a meditation retreat and not uttering the mantra, That's how difficult it is. It was a lovely spring afternoon. I knew it wouldn't last long. I was 10 years into a second marriage, 8 years into being a dad of 2 kids, and I was tired. I was spent. All I wanted was peace and quiet. But you know what I got instead? The questions from my son, Austin. Dad, is Santa real? Dad, where do babies come from? Dad, can we give my sister Maya back to the stork? Dad, when are you gonna die? Not if I was gonna die, when. Apparently he wanted to calendar it to make sure there wasn't a conflict with something really important going on in his life. And then, not content just to ruin my day, he wanted to ruin my marriage. Dad, how come you make all the money and mom makes all the decisions?
Yeah.
Even an observation like you're clumsy, I'm athletic, sound like a question. Sir, who's my real dad? Implied. Well, I answered most of the questions to the best of my ability, and I needed to. I mean, what was I going to say to my son? I don't know, Austin. Google it? I mean, I wanted him to be raised by a man, not an app. That's right. I'm a man, not a bot. Do you know what that means? That means I can identify traffic signals in a busy intersection. That's what that means. Well, I knew that I could handle his questions for the first 8, 9, 10 years, but I knew the tough ones were coming. You know what I'm talking about, the ones about girls and dating. Now's not the time to go into my romantic resume. It's not as if it was lengthy. It's actually quite short and very sad. As I understand the storytelling thing, we're supposed to laugh, not cry. So I'll quickly gloss over the lowlights of my romantic resume. Lost my virginity in college. Okay, it was graduate school. Divorced twice. But other than those 3 minor demerits, I mean, I was a regular Don Juan and fully qualified to host Loveline. That's what I thought. I wasn't prepared for these questions about romance. I actually prayed to God. I prayed that Austin would be asexual. Does that make me bad? One day, he was in 5th grade, and Bailey happened upon the scene. He came home and explained, I have a girlfriend. Her name is Bailey. Dad, I even talked to her. I was impressed. What did you say to her, Austin? Well, I started to say something. My palms got sweaty, my stomach got upset, and I had to go to the bathroom. It's okay, Austin. Just come here. Breathe in and out, in and out. It's going to be okay. I wanted to reassure him, but also myself, because I was almost triggered at this point about, anyway, he and Bailey went back and forth for about 3.5 weeks. So it truly was love. And he went to a trip to a field trip to Washington, D.C., and she broke up with him. He came back and told me about everything was fine. And I said this and she said that. And next thing you know, we broke up. I said, Dad, how can you say you love me one day and then drop me the next day? I cried myself to sleep. I intervened again. Austin, all you need to, Dad, not the breathing exercise again, please. I said, no, you're right, Austin. This is more important than breath. We're taking up another level. We're going to prayer and affirmation. So close your eyes and listen to your dad. Lord, I just want to thank you for your abundance and all that you have blessed me. And I'm grateful. And Lord, I stand with you, overwhelmed and confused by women. And I know that it'll be that way for the rest of my life. And I accept that. And so it is. Amen. I quickly shot a look at him. His eyes were closed. He seemed to be swept up by the power of prayer. And then he spoke. Dad, nothing personal, but you've been divorced before, haven't you? And in your current marriage, you spend more time on the couch than you do your own bed. Shouldn't I just talk to mom? Ow, that hurt. It was time for me to pray. Lord, please don't let me kill this boy. I was right there. Well, middle school came around and the ante went up. I don't know if you've been around middle schoolers, but the women are getting curves and they're very aggressive. So on the first day, a lady said to Austin, "You can kiss me if you like." Can you believe that? So anyway, he came home not with tales of love, but of tales of lust. So I quickly preemptively attacked. I just had to take control of the narrative. I said, Austin, do you remember that time that we played hooky and we went to the Staples Center and watched basketball games all day long? That time I told you not to talk to your mom, tell your mom about it, and you drank like 3 sodas and ate 5 hot dogs and had 4 brownies. That's how you're gonna feel when you lean in for your first kiss. Wow, Dad. Hey, Dad, that night I puked. Am I gonna get sick on my first kiss? No, I don't think so, Austin. It'll be fine, but your stomach will be upset. Dad, what's that first kiss like? Austin, you know when we watched the space shuttle and it went up and started to fire and the heat and the thundering stuff? Do you remember that? That's how you're gonna feel when you finally kiss. Wow, Dad. Hey, Dad, what's it like when you do it? You know, come on, Dad. Is it like the space shuttle Discovery taking off, the rocket going in the air? I had to calm him down. Austin, calm down. Your rocket will take off in due time. It just calm down. Dad, I gotta know. Austin, you know I'm a very smart man and I can answer any question that you give me. But on this subject matter, there is no answer. There simply are no words. Dad, you know words? 15 years have elapsed. Austin's still alive. He's doing well. I'm still his dad. And our relationship has changed. It's sort of a two-way thing. And unfortunately, I divorced his mom. So I'm single and I'm just now dating. I went on a first date the other day and things were going well. And then all of a sudden, my palms got sweaty, my stomach got upset, and I had to rush to the bathroom. I went home and I called him in a panic. I needed his help. He said, Dad, fortunately, things have changed. He said, you don't have to breathe or pray or anything. You're going to be fine. And I know you're going to ask about the kiss, Dad. It's like this, Dad. Do you remember when you got the free dessert on your birthday at Red Lobster? That's how a kiss feels. Do you remember the excitement when you opened the mailbox and you got your first AARP card, Dad? And as far as the sensation, Dad, do you remember when you put all that Bengay on your aching body? That's how a kiss feels. Dad, do you have any more questions? No, Austin, I think I've had enough questions that'll last a lifetime. Back to you, Liz.
Nice.
That was
John, wow,
Yeah, way to go.
wonderful.
lots of memories there.
Lots of memories, life lessons we could really relate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And good luck on the
Thank you.
dating scene. All right. We're going from LA area, again, east to the Mother Lode. And our next storyteller is Ricky Drew. And Andrew's gonna,
I'm having a little problem finding him. Did he leave?
I wonder. Ricky, are you still with us? He came in late. I think he might have been having some difficulties.
Because I had him. Yeah, I had him as a co-host, but I don't see him anymore.
Yeah, he's not on. I looked at.
Okay, well,
Okay.
we will,
Wanted to say.
we'll move on then, and if he's able to come back, that will be great.
Sounds
Okay,
good. We'll go to Dave.
all right, so we're gonna go to David Tarn. And I think I told you, I know I told you earlier that unfortunately Linda Kennedy couldn't be with us. And so we have an extra treat that we did. If you saw the poster and the email, we didn't know we would be having David Tarn, but I think you, many of you know him very well. He is a member of the Sacramento Storytelling Guild. He is a retired public servant turned storyteller. He is very active working with seniors, doing a lot of service, using storytelling, improv, all kinds of things. That's very dear to my heart. Some of you know, I used to work at Stagebridge Senior Theater, and it's just storytelling is, and theater and creativity are for every age. So I love that Dave, in his retirement, is bringing that to others also, even older than he. His favorite stories, he says, are historical fiction. And he loves telling stories on Zoom, where he can go all over the world to tell stories and meet other storytellers. I think a lot of us feel the same, David. And his story today is called Leadfoot. And that's really mysterious, and I can't wait to hear what it's about. Please tell us the story of Leadfoot.
Well, hello, everybody. My name indeed is Dave, and I have been the fortunate recipient. I've had several nicknames. The last one I had was where this place I worked, they all called me the Big Mac. Before that, it was Mr. Dave. But my favorite nickname I got when I was a young man. It was in the mid-70s. They called me Leadfoot. You see, I was working up in the gold country on top of Mount Hogue. I worked for the Bluff Creek Mining Company, and I drove a dump truck for them. And what I did was, the mine was this big open pit mine that was on top of Mount Hogue. And they would mine this limestone, they would crush it, and then it would get loaded into this dump truck, and I would haul it from the mine, which was close to Cool, California, all the way to Sacramento, California, to a processing plant. And I loved that job. I loved my little nickname because I was the fastest truck driver that they had. Well, one day that proved fortuitous. On this particular day, I had just been loaded up and I started making my way out of the mine. And I was going up and down, climbing up the grade to get to the top of the mountain before you drop down onto the highway. And I was going up that last grade, that last big hill, Chicken Bone Hill. And I was almost to the top. I mean, I was almost there. And then suddenly, the truck, the engine just started to spit and to sputter, and then it died just like that. Well, I just jumped on those brakes. But as soon as I did that, I knew that those brakes would give. Because you see, that truck, fully loaded, weighed 37 tons. And sure enough, there was a loud pop. And that truck started to roll back down that hill. Pretty soon it was picking up speed and it started to careen, and I was doing the best I could to steer it. And it kept going faster and faster and weaving back and forth across that road. And when it got down to the bottom of the hill, it started to bounce. And when it did that, it jumped the road. And it went right off the road down the side of Hogue Mountain, which is pretty steep. Well, it just plummeted faster and faster and faster. And I swear to God, I did the best I could to steer it. I was looking out those mirrors and I was trying to miss the trees. I just ran over God knows how many bushes. And then halfway down that mountain, I didn't see it till it was too late, but I hit this huge ponderosa pine. And when that 37 tons slammed into that tree, well, that tree, it shook. And then it shuddered. And then it juddered. But it stopped that truck. God, I was relieved. I was just sitting in that cab, taking a deep breath, thinking, oh God, it's all over. When I started to hear this sound way above, up in the treetops, it was a kind of a whooshing sound. It like something heavy was falling down through the branches, and it got louder and louder and louder, and then boom, right, and something hit the back of that truck. Something landed in the back bed of the truck. Well, I was pretty curious. So I opened the door to the cab and I stepped out onto that little truck step, and I stood on there and I peeked up and looked over the truck bed into the back to see what had landed in the back of the bed. There was this huge black furry mass, and it was huge. As I watched, that mass started to rise up, and then it started to stretch out, and pretty soon it was up on its legs, and it's raised its arms up towards the sky like that, and it was a 500-pound, 8-foot tall Bigfoot. Well, I was stunned. I was shocked. I'd never seen a Bigfoot. And as I was staring at it in disbelief, it saw me, and we locked eyes. And when that happened, it leaned towards me with this vicious look on its face, held its hands out, and roared at me. Well, that scared the heck out of me. I fell right out of the truck. I hit the side of that mountain, and I just started rolling down the side of the mountain. Well, that triggered something in Bigfoot. He jumped out of the truck, and he started chasing me down the side of that mountain. Well, pretty soon I got my footing, and I started running. That's when I lived up to my nickname, Leadfoot. I ran as fast as I could. Pretty soon I got down to the bottom of the mountain, and I burst out of the forest onto the American River. I just dove right into that river, and I swam across, and I stood up on the other side, and I turned and I faced the forest to see if Bigfoot was following. Sure enough, there he came. He was going so fast, he couldn't slow himself down. And as he popped out of that forest and he saw the river, I saw this look of terror on his face. And he threw out his arms like this, and he just went straight into that river. And as soon as he hit that water, he started flopping around and flailing in the water and screaming and yelling. It kind of shocked me. I thought, what the heck is that? And then it hit me. It dawned on me. Bigfoot doesn't know how to swim. Well, right there, the fear left me. Something happened, just something clicked inside. I dove back into that river. I swam out to Bigfoot. I dove underneath him, and I reached up and I grabbed the calf of his leg, and I pulled and I pulled and I pulled, and I forced his foot down until it touched the bottom. And as soon as his foot touched the bottom, well, he just stood up. It was August. The river was only 4 foot deep. Well, Bigfoot just stood there, and he kind of shook himself off like some old dog, and water went everywhere. And then I'm looking up at him, he's looking down at me. And I'm thinking, what are you doing here in the river, Dave? Well, the next thing I know, Bigfoot breaks out with this big grin and he reaches out and he scoops me up in his arms and he starts to squeeze. Well, that's when I started screaming. And as soon as I did that, Bigfoot let me go. But he looked kind of confused. So I held out my hand to him. After a moment, he kind of got it and he reached down, he grabbed my hand and we shook hands. And then we stopped shaking hands and we just looked at each other and kind of drank that moment in. You know, now we were friends. After that moment passed, he turned and he just slowly walked out of that river into the forest and disappeared. And as he did that, I thought to myself, you know, it must be wonderful to be a Bigfoot and to be the king of the forest. And I was a little envious, but I was grateful that I was a Leadfoot.
Thank you, Dave. From Leadfoot to Bigfoot. I had no idea that you were going to be the Leadfoot in the story. I love that. I love that. A tall tale set in California. What could be better? Thank you so much. Andrew, do we have Ricky on the Zoom or not?
I don't believe he's come back.
Okay, Ricky, it's
Oh, yes, he has. Yes, he
Yeah.
has. Yes. Hold on, I'll hook him up here. I'm going to add a spotlight. I'll got to remove everybody else. Okay. I was going to bring everybody on, but now we can
Okay.
now we can have
All
Richard.
right. Well, this is Ricky Drew from the Motherlode Storytelling Guild and
Ricky D.
Ricky D.
Ricky D. And his story is called How to Make Elephant Stew. Welcome, Ricky D.
Thank you very much. I must explain that 2 stories ago, the power went out here and it took me this long to find you again. But this is a story from Manjuro, true actual historical figure. And that's who I am. When I was 14, as you may recall, if you ever met me, I was storm-tossed, left on a island with 4 others and almost died after almost a year of no food, no water, just drinking from little puddles and eating raw birds until they flew away. But then a wonderful man, Captain Whitfield, came with his whaling ship and saved us and took us to the Sandwich Islands. And I guess he must have liked me because I was a very happy 14-year-old, happy to be saved. And he asked me to stay with his ship and go back to New England. And here I was, a poor fisherman's son. My father had died. I had gone off on this fishing trip with strangers I met on the beach, and we were storm wrecked. And now I was living in Fairhaven and actually going to school and learning to read and write, which I never would have done in my former life. And I learned to be a whaling sailor and a cooper making barrels. And so I went on some sailing trips and made some money, but I always wanted to get home to see my mother again. I had left her just for a few days and my younger siblings. And when I got back from my second whaling adventure, where the captain actually lost his mind and it made me go up in rank into steering one of the whale boats. When we got back with our money from our whale oil, we found out there was gold discovered on the other side of the continent in California. And I thought, I need to go there and see if I can make enough money to go across that ocean and back to my homeland, which, by the way, would not accept us upon punishment of death if we dared leave the island that time. And so it was always a risk, but I wanted to see my mother. And so I went by ship. Since I knew how to sail, I got on a sailing ship and we went down around the Horn, back up, and made our way up the west coast of the continent and got to San Francisco. And that's where my story begins, of finding the elephant. It was a term that the other sailors and gold diggers and panners and miners all used. They wanted to go see the elephant, and if they found gold, that was the elephant they had found. That is finding and seeing the elephant. And so I made my way up the river to Sacramento and out into the foothills, and was working and finding gold and meeting all these different people. And around then is when California became a state. And there was this town called Rough and Ready. And when they found out that statehood had been declared, they were very jubilant until they found out the state wanted to levy taxes against all the miners. And so they did not like that idea. It was hard enough finding gold without having to then give part of it to this new state government. So Rough and Ready, the town, got together and said, this is not right. Let's secede from this new state. We're going to claim our independence and become the Rough and Ready independent country or nation. Well, as it happened, after they all agreed to that and said, yes, we're going to be independent, it was soon the 4th of July, which of course everyone wanted to celebrate because the work was so hard and the toil. And so what happened was they went to the big town of Placerville, and they wanted to buy liquor and they wanted to have a great 4th of July celebration. But the shopkeepers told them, we don't sell liquor to foreigners. And they were foreigners because they had seceded. So within minutes, they decided to rejoin and buy their liquor and have a fun party. There were all kinds of schemers and scammers. As many know, that the people that made the most money during the gold rush were the shopkeepers, because they could always sell at very high prices to all these miners, and they would be paid in their gold. And most miners did not make much money, if any. And there were other scam artists. One of the scams was called gold grease. And if you rub this grease all over your body and roll down a hill, this special grease would pick up all the gold. And at the bottom, you would just take all the grease off and melt it away and you'd be rich. Well, of course, gold grease was just grease, but that is the sort of thing that fleeced the miners. But there were parties. People would love to get together when they could. And one special event, not long after the 4th of July, they decided to celebrate the new Rough and Ready joining back into the state and the nation. So they called out to all the miners, let's get together. We're going to have a great celebration, and we're going to have a special meal, elephant stew. And I was part of this party. Of course, I was working hard and I did find some gold and did get back home, but that's not this story. Elephant stew. This is how you make it. You go out and find a medium-sized elephant, because the big ones are too hard to catch. You dice it up. You get a few bushels of carrots, some bushels of potatoes, and bushels of onions. And you chop them up. And you put them all in the biggest pot you can find. And you start cooking it and cooking it. Add some salt, add some pepper. But just in case, because no one likes to come up short, if you have lots of people coming to your party, have a few rabbits on the side. And when you see all these people coming and you look at your big pot of elephant stew and you decide, we might need to stretch it a bit. Take those rabbits, dress them, chop them up, dice them, put them in the stew, and it helps make that stew much, much bigger so you can feed everyone. But under no circumstance ever tell anybody that you put the rabbits in the stew, because no one likes to find a hair in their stew. Thank you.
Ah, Ricky, thank you so much. I had no idea where that was going. Oh, boy. I
Oh,
love
boy.
hearing recipes, and I was just going along. That was such a great example of, teaching us a lot of history, and I learned something that I, and doing it with a laugh and a smile and a way, and when we laugh, we get more oxygen in our brains and we remember better. And so we're all going to remember what
The
not
hair in
to
the
put
stew.
in your elephant stew. Yeah. Or any other stew. Thank you very much. All right. What an evening of stories. Before I forget, I just wanted to say, Dave Tarvin, I apologize. I didn't say your name right. That was Dave Tarvin, who we heard just before, and he was great. All right, we're coming to the end of our evening. I invite all of you to go to gallery view if you know how to do that, so you can see everybody else, because this is a community event, not just a performance event. I think that's what's really special about it. And can you just raise your hand if you are yourself a member? I think some of our storytellers invited friends and so forth, but are you a member of a local guild or story swap group? Raise your hand. Yay, I have to go to 2 pages to see. I see a lot of hands up, and then I see some people who we can't see, but okay, hands down. Are you a member of the Storytelling Association of California? Now, be honest, raise your hand. Ed, what do you think? Looks pretty good. In case you're not a member, one of the perks of being a member is to get to come to all of these for free, all these wonderful genre events. And just in case you're not a member, we invite you to be one. I'm going to put it in the chat for everyone. There we go. And, we're part of a group. And I feel like these Zoom genre events are really allowing us to meet each other from across the state and beyond the state. So let's meet and greet, just as a kind of part of our closing, laughter yoga style. We're in these boxes, right? We're kind of frustrated that we're in these Zoom boxes, but let's use a little laughter and a little of our imagination to push out. And I learned this from Lynn Ford, who's a wonderful storyteller from Ohio, Afro-Latin storyteller. She's also a laughter yoga leader. So kind of try and, with laughter and your hands, break out. And so we're all a group. So we go, and maybe to the side. And down below. And reach out your hand and, oh, kind of frightening in these still pandemic days. One more time, shake somebody's hand. Very good, very good. Yay. Let us bring back our storytellers. Andrew, would you spotlight all our storytellers?
Okay, I'll give it a try.
All right.
John,
John.
and then Beverly, Terry, and I guess I better do you too, right?